Hey everyone, this is your OG, Original Gamer, and this is another Godforge video. Today we'll be picking up our future focus again, this time looking at the Avalon faction for possible champions that we could have coming into the game. Not champions we know about or we've seen in any way. These are just pure speculation for champs associated with the mythology that are in other games like Smite or other things like that. And so let us know what you think. Do you have a figure from mythology you'd really like to see in the game? Did we miss it? Did we hit it? Let us know. Without further ado, let's optimize. All right, so first up, we are going to start with a character that your OG has been a big fan of for a while and I think would be really cool to see in the game. And I'm sure she will, but she's probably going to be a legendary champion. She's probably going to be pretty powerful. We'll see. But the first up, we're going with the Lady of the Lake, okay? So if you know anything about Arthurian legend or King Arthur, you'd likely have been introduced to the Lady of the Lake because she gives Arthur his famed sword Excalibur, and this thus grants him divine right to rule. Okay, she is one of the most enigmatic and multifaceted figures in Arthurian legend. She embodies themes of magic, feminine power, and mystique. She has been known by many names. I'm not even going to try to pronounce them, but they start with N's and V's across many different texts in history. Okay, she likely evolved, or this character likely evolved from water deities, such as lake fairies, or possibly the goddess Coventina, who was worshipped in Roman Britain. Okay, besides distributing hardware, she is known also as the guardian of Lancelot. She rescued him as an orphan and raised him in an otherworldly aquatic realm. Kind of sounds like a womb. But she is called, this was called the Land of the Maidens, and she gave him a magic ring and armor. So she was positioned as this fairy surrogate mother. So she certainly sounds like a legendary invoker to me. Let me know what you guys think. But that is first up, is the Lady of the Lake. Next up, we are going with Lancelot. Now, I'm pretty sure Lancelot's going to be in the game. I mean, it would be hard to have Avalon without Lancelot. So he's kind of an assumed pick here, but the second half of this is going to be our actual pick, okay? So we all know now that Lancelot grew up with the Lady of the Lake. And we'll hear how he was a little friendly with Guinevere as well. That was his true love, even though she was Arthur's first wife. He may be one of the most recognizable names in this space. So I think it's safe to say he's going to be in the game in the Avalon faction. But what about his illegitimate son, Galahad, okay? So Elaine of Corbenic used magic to disguise herself as Guinevere, Lancelot's true love, and this led to Galahad, his illegitimate son. Now, Lancelot initially threatens Elaine, but then forgives her upon learning of the pregnancy. Merlin also foretells that Galahad would surpass Lancelot and engender this lion, okay? Perhaps we have a morphing champion here. His name, so like Galahad, was Lancelot's original birth name, but the Lady of the Lake called him Lancelot and gave him a new name. So he actually has Lancelot's original name and he's going to surpass him. This represents sort of each new generation surpassing the last, but I think this father-son combo could make for some really cool kits and some really cool combinations in the game if both were in. Next up, Guinevere. Okay, so Guinevere is the lover, the first wife of Arthur, the King Arthur. So another synergy spotlight. Possibly they could work well together if they're on the same team. She stands really at the heart of Arthurian legend as a very highly complex and kind of highly contested figure as well. She's a symbol of a queen. She's kind of also the catalyst for Camelot's demise, but we'll talk about that. And she's a reflection on our evolving social views towards femininity and power, and also this sort of male anxiety over controlling female agency, and you've seen that through history. So she is also a rival of Morgan Le Fay, who we may see coming up in this list. Basically, to capture Guinevere, she started out as a warrior queen, Arthur's first wife. She was faithful, but then she was kidnapped. Then she fell in love with Lancelot and had an affair in that sense. She was then redeemed by faith, and then she was abducted by Mordred, and then she was rescued, and then she causes a war, so to speak, that leads to the downfall of Camelot and everything like that. So is she Camelot's scapegoat? She embodies, in many ways, the tension between female autonomy and patriarchal control. Her evolution from a Welsh warrior to a French adulteress to a feminist icon shows more about the era and how ideal womanhood was continuously being redefined over time. Where Arthur represented kingship and Lancelot represented chivalry, Guinevere symbolizes the cost of both of those things. Really a neat character, Guinevere. Constantine III, okay? This is our third champion we're calling out here. This individual is the successor after Arthur dies and he goes off to Avalon, is brought off to Avalon. Constantine III is the rightful heir to the throne. However, he commits sacrilege by murdering Mordred's sons at the church altar, leading to divine retribution. Therefore, he only rules for 3 years before being assassinated by his nephew and triggering this big civil war. So symbolically, he represents the fragility of maintaining that post-Arthur rule, as Camelot's ideals tend to collapse without Arthur present. Constantine represents the never-ending struggle of living, as opposed to the eternal hope that Avalon provides. He could be like a rarer below even, kind of like almost like an undead champ. Maybe he's brought back to life in the game, and he's only powerful against Mordred or like abilities like Mordred's. I could see him being a really neat niche champ, and I didn't want to include only legendary style champs. So he's sort of our niche champ. Okay, so this is Constantine III. Just Constantine in a sense. This is our bonus boss, okay? So what you are looking at here is Morgan Le Fay and her 8 sisters, okay? And they're called the 9 Sisters of Avalon. They protect Avalon. I think this could be a really cool boss, okay? If the 9 sisters, they can transform into any of the 9 of them. So Geoffrey of Monmouth, who was like our big history writer in terms of like historical writing on King Arthur and things, he names only 8, but he implies that there are 9 sisters. And I think that's because Morgan Le Fay is considered to be the chief of the 9 sisters. We're going to talk more about her. She's our last pick, but this bonus boss is if she was involved with her sisters as a boss. Okay, so this is how this would work. They guard the mystical Isle of Avalon, and it's a realm of healing, prophecy, and eternal magic. So Morgan Le Fay is the chief. She is a shapeshifter. We've talked about her when we looked at the announced trailer. She could be the Crow. That is one of the things she can shapeshift into, okay? Her sisters possess powers over life, death, and nature. So we're going to go deeper on Morgan Le Fay in a second. Spoiler alert, of course. But now the other sisters, right? Morano is the great spirit. She has weather magic. Maybe she rains debuffs. Mazoe is the apple giver and fertility. Maybe she's the revive bit. Glitten is the shining one, all known for purification. Maybe she does a cleanse, a debuff cleanse. Glitania is the star tracker. She's into astrology. Maybe she puts buffs or some sort of protection on the team, on the boss. And then Glitten, this is tied to prophecy. So maybe this is turn meter effect, right? And then Tyrano is the land queen. This is all about sovereignty and ruling power. Maybe this is like a base that the boss returns to, something like that. Fitton, the silent watcher, holds secrets, so perhaps this is a form of the boss that only comes out under certain circumstances. And then Thetis, the Greek sea nymph, is like water magic, so again, that could be healing for the team, or that could be drowning the enemy. But basically, these 9 sisters, they're kind of symbolic or similar in a way to Greek muses or the Pleiades, the star nymphs. They operate as a collective consciousness, rarely acting individually outside of Morgan. So that's why I thought they could make a really cool boss with sort of these 9 sisters rotating through their different abilities and powers, you know, depending on how you interact with the boss. So the picture we see here is King Arthur being, when he dies, he's brought to Avalon, and then these sisters, while dangerous, are also known for healing and that sort of magic as well. So they're a double-edged sword, and they're healing Arthur so that he can live for eternity in Avalon as his, final rest. Okay. So that is the 9 sisters. And last, we are going to talk about Morgan Le Fay as our 5th possible champion to add to the game. It's been a lot of speculation around her with the announced trailer, there being a crow or a raven and a lot of that sort of thing. So Morgan Le Fay is one of the most complex and transformative figures in Western mythology, okay? She's a goddess who is diminished to a witch, a healer who's twisted into a seductress, and a sovereign made out to be a villain. What an interesting character backstory, okay? So let's go a little deeper. Her name, Morgan Le Fay, means seaborn, and like water, she has healing powers as well. She started in history as a Welsh mother goddess linked to rivers and fertility, and then the Morrigan was an Irish phantom queen of battle, prophecy, and shapeshifting. She could shapeshift into a crow or a horse. She was first seen as the chief of the 9 sisters that guard Avalon. We just talked about that. As the lore spread, though, her character was darkened, reflecting medieval fears toward feminine power, and shows the demonization of female healers, midwives, and leaders. She represents the rejected feminine, okay? Creative and destructive forces that society fears due to a lack of understanding and has been suppressed for thousands of years. Her legacy endures because she went from witch to femme fatale to trauma survivor reclaiming her power. A cycle of hope for women everywhere, I think. Okay, a few notable acts that Morgan Le Fay does in history that might be interesting to her kit. She gives Arthur a magic cup that spills wine on unfaithful wives, and he was targeting Guinevere to see if she was cheating with Lancelot, which obviously she was. So she has magic in her kit. She has healing, obviously. She sends Arthur a cursed cloak as a poisoned gift. So she has, obviously, the potential for debuffing or putting out, some sort of a debuff of that nature. But she also ferries Arthur to Avalon for healing. So she's a bit of both, okay? Merlin teaches her magic, but she uses it to entrap him. She's historically also associated with Saint Morgan, a 6th century Welsh saint linked to female-centric cults in the Glastonbury Lake Village around the time of Christ, right around the birth of Christ. So she studied astronomy, medicine, and chemistry. Maybe she was the first woman in STEM, but what did she get for that curiosity? Well, she got called a witch, of course, but that makes sense because she was a complex character who portrayed sensuality that was alluring and could seduce knights, but she was also threatening and emasculating sorceress. Oh, P.S. She is Arthur's half-sister, too. She's also a child of Uther Pendragon, Arthur's father. She's seen as the dark side to Arthur's light, a reminder that light cannot exist without shadow. So that is Morgan Le Fay. We're hoping to see her in the game. All right, folks, that is all for this one today. I hope you enjoyed the top 5 possible champions for the Avalon faction, plus a bonus boss, maybe. If you liked it, be sure to hit that button and subscribe. And if you think we missed someone, drop it in the comments below, because there are just so many great champs to choose from. Also, thanks again to Fudge Boss Elenika Mixup for his in-depth research on this. Take care of yourself, and remember, play smarter.